Okay, we're back. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Regular meeting, February 13th. That's today. Here we are. Meeting's been called to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Council, we do have two in-camera items. If we could amend the agenda to incorporate those. I would look for a motion. Councilor Reid.
Adoption of the agenda as amended.
Okay. All those in favor of the agenda? That carries. Thank you. Same goes for our previous meeting minutes. Look for a motion. Councillor Flowers.
Move to adopt the minutes of the January 23rd, 2023 regular council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. I don't see any discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Minutes approved. Okay, good work. Let's move into delegations. Tonight, we have a delegation from Alberta Health Services Emergency Medical Services. Easy for me to say. Joining us tonight, and I hope I get your names correct, Mr. Tony Passage. You bet. Oof. Lauren Calder. And Rob Jabs. Yeah?
Yeah, Rob's back there.
Okay. Good evening.
Thank you for having us out. I think this was supposed to be in December and got rescheduled, so I apologize for that. But my name is Tony Passage. I'm the Associate Executive Director, currently responsible for Calgary. That was effective in December, so I needed a little bit of time to get up to speed on Calgary. I came from the same role in South and Central, so I'm being responsible more for the rural environment, and South and Central is sort of my background. Not that that matters that much, but it's just what it is. So today I'll go through sort of the presentation and hopefully sort of answer some of your questions. I do have a few slides that I put in at the end. Probably gets to more of the conversation you're looking to have versus the first few slides, but if I can get through the presentation and then obviously answer any questions you guys might have. So that sort of covers our goals for the presentation, is just to give you some information about where we're at. Look at some of those concerns and look for some of our opportunities for improvement. Try not to do that. Probably as these are put together, our presentation is pretty standard, though, so a lot of these slides are familiar with whatever community we're at. We just sort of cover what the resources are in the community from a scheduling perspective. So two ambulances 24/7, and then a couple IFT trucks 7 to 3:24, 3:30, and then 4 o'clock to midnight is what is on the schedule for the resources in Cochrane. Some of the groups that help support our response obviously is the Urgent Care Center here in Cochrane, Medical First Response Agency. We get support from air ambulance, mostly from STARS in the area, obviously fixed wing, not really needed in that area. We do have a community AED registration, and there's 7 AEDs currently registered, and this is usually my plug. If we know there's AEDs out there that aren't registered, to go to HeartSafe and help us get them registered. We know where they are, and it helps our dispatch system to help direct people to the closest AED. Call volume. So we do two things, and there'll be 2 slides on call volume. So these are the events that occur in the town of Cochrane. So I have the last fiscal year, which is April 1st to March 31st of 2022. Obviously broken out by quarter, and for a total of just shy of 2,500. And then we did sort of year to date on this fiscal year, April 1st to December of this year. Numbers are a little higher. We'll see how the next sort of month goes, but just probably I anticipate the call volume to be just a little bit higher here in Cochrane, which sort of fits sort of some of our narrative. The volumes have been going up a bit across the province, but not drastically in Cochrane. The other one that we look at is the units that are responding into Cochrane to do these 2,500 events. And what this shows us is that Cochrane is only doing about 55% of their calls, and we get support from Calgary coming out here, as well as surrounding Airdrie, Canmore, sort of a few less that are closer in that part of it. Not much different, last year as this year. It is a little bit higher of of Cochrane being available, 61% versus 55. I will say it's a small gain, not much on that part of it. But we are seeing Calgary come out less, a little bit more of Airdrie. So a few changes there, but nothing drastically on that part. One of the data points that we always get, communities wondering how many times an ambulance is in their community, that piece. And unfortunately, we have to sort of use a little bit of data like this because we currently don't have AVL data that we capture where we could actually put sort of some boundaries in that municipality and sort of show in real time which ambulances are in there. One of the questions is how often is Cochrane responding into Calgary? We made a change in our Metro response plan in January of 2022, which is sort of the first slide where we sort of average, 59 events a week that Cochrane would have been doing in Calgary. When we made that change, and since then, that's dropped it in half, still 29, still too high, but we have had some weeks where it's been good. If you go back like 2 weeks ago, it was only 3 events. Last week at 34 events. So we're still our goal would be to get that down in single digits, 3, 4, 5 events in a week. And what that means to me is that, they clear up from a call and they're the closest responding, driving past a cardiac arrest or something really serious, which then they would respond to first versus the amount that are there. So we are seeing it come down, but we got work to do there to improve that even more. Now it's just scrolling. There we go. Where does Cochrane go? So what this one here is telling us where the units that are based out of Cochrane respond. And last year, fiscal year, we responded to Calgary 55% of the time, and in Cochrane 26. And the numbers associated to that in each quarter is about 1,200 responses in 2 of the quarters, and there were 1,600 responses. So that total event volume, when you look at the percentage, is about 5,700. And so that number, obviously, of responding in Calgary is our number one place, is something that we need to work to address and fix. When you look at April 1st on year to date, we're having about 1,100 calls a year, so we are seeing a drop in volume. And some of that is just because we're not responding as many times in Calgary. Some of the other initiatives, 811, some of those other pieces, every little bit counts and helps us reduce that number. But we are seeing quite a percentage drop of down to 31, so sort of 24% less volume that we're doing in Calgary. So we have made some inroads in there. We still have, like I said, a significant amount of time to go in that context. So we are seeing, if the data stays true for sort of this quarter, we'll do about 4,400 responses versus last year 5,700. So a drop in about 1,300 events of work that the Cochrane units were doing, which obviously by design would mean that they should be available more in station, available to respond in Cochrane. Obviously our transport destination, still obviously mostly our merge calls and serious patients end up in Calgary with some to the urgent care center, the odd trip to Canmore and Airdrie, so nothing surprising in that data piece. On the next slide, what we have is kind of some interesting piece there when we look at our number to urgent care center. So we're already at like year to date right now, 600 transports to the urgent care center. So we are seeing our crews utilize the urgent care center more as a destination. It's higher than obviously all the other years, and we still have 3 months of data to get into there. But conversely, we're not seeing a big increase in the number of trips that we're doing out of the urgent care center. So we are seeing ourselves take more patients to the urgent care center without having sort of that follow-up transfer that's making us go to Calgary just a little bit later. So we seem to be getting the right patient to the urgent care center that's being able to be looked after at that location on that part of it. So, that just saves us that travel time into Calgary and at this time sort of getting tied up. And I'll chat a little bit more about wait times there. So it is helping on some of those initiatives and destinations for sure. Response times. So obviously we've got the last sort of 6 years in there, sort of 2016 at 12 minutes, year to date, 24 minutes at the P90. Well above our target. Our goal is to get that to 10 and 15 minutes to make it look more like 2016. And we've got work to do to get to that response time. We definitely did see it with the volume going up in 2020, 2021, around some of the pandemic pieces and the hospital wait times and the pressure in Calgary. And what our goal is, as I mentioned before, we're not seeing huge increases in Cochrane in volume, But we're seeing that big increase in Calgary really putting pressure on our outlying communities, and we need to fix the root cause of that. I'll cover this slide, and then I got a few slides of a little bit of where we're at. So as I mentioned, sort of that increase of volume in the Calgary Metro. Sorry, my printed notes are a little behind my slides. You know, the IFT discharge options, so we're starting to utilize more NAT vans to discharge vehicles, and NAT vans are sort of the wheelchair vans that we can utilize. So we have engaged some of our groups and are increasing the amount of events that those are happening today. Triaging low acuity 911 calls. So these initiatives that are attached to that are things like the 811 and moving calls over to there to a nurse. It's also things like our non-injury MVCs, our fire responses when there's no fires, those kind of things. So we are seeing some reduces in there. We did add 10 units into the city of Calgary in the fall. And again, we're scheduled to add another 10 resources in the spring. We're just sort of waiting for our finalized budget to come back from government on posting those positions and moving that piece forward. Hospital wait times, we've had significant work, and I got a couple slides that will do that. Hospital wait times isn't really an EMS issue. Obviously, it's working with our health partners in the emergency departments who really need to free up our ambulances to get out in there. We've done a lot of work, actually, I say we, my colleagues on the health side have done a lot of work on patient flow in recent months, and I'll have a couple slides that'll kind of give at least an idea of where we're at. We definitely have a lot of work to sustain that work and move that forward, but I'll talk a little bit more there. Our integrated operations center is what we partner with our health folks. And probably the biggest piece they do there is really help us on transport destination, that we get our right patient to the right location based on hospital bed availability, those kind of things. So they're able to help us there. That helps free up our crews a little bit sooner. Increasing our transport to urgent care centers, as I mentioned on the Cochrane Urgent Care Center. Those are some of the initiatives there. Fluctuating EMS staffing levels. One of our big issues is our current environment of staffing. You know, we're hiring 40 more full-time people. We're going to be moving people that are in temporary full-time, what we call rovers. So those are staff that aren't assigned to a unit, that they're almost like an overstaffing model. We can deploy them where we need to. We had those in place, but they're temporary, and we're having a hard time keeping them filled because people want permanent positions and that kind of thing. So we're moving those from temporary to full-time, permanent. We have engaged our casuals as we've worked with them on not so much full-time, but at least regular employment. So different part-time options, different shift length options, where we can actually capture them and schedule in advance. You know, I'll give some examples. Like, we know we're gonna have sick calls, short notice sick calls. And right now, we get the sick calls, and then we get reacting, trying to fill those pieces. And we definitely know on Fridays and Saturdays and weekends and holidays, people are busy. They don't want to pick up their phone in real time and come into work. We can predict what we know that's gonna happen, and we gotta get more proactive in our scheduling, in our staffing, and have shift lengths that our staff wanna work and schedules that they wanna work, so that we can get in front of that and not be so reactive trying to staff our ambulances in a reactive mode. And again, the one piece is just our you know, suburban rural resources coming into the city. You know, we see that whether it's our regional center or the metro center of Calgary, we need to solve the root cause where that doesn't need to happen on that part of it. So what I have here is just a snippet of, you know, you'd sit there and go, well, we're solving wait times, and we're not solving them yet, but we're work in progress. And this is just an example for me. This is January 5th. And what's noted out of here for me when I reviewed sort of this data, if you look on the right, the total destination time hours, and that 139 hours. So on that day, we had 139 hours that our ambulances waited in the emergency department after 90 minutes, which is a ton of hours of wait time there. The other piece that when you look at this in a Calgary scenario, and as much as I'm sharing it's Calgary and we're in Cochrane, if we can solve sort of the root cause, then we can sort of make sure that our resources stay here where they're meant to be. When you look at Calgary, we have a percentage of time sort of in the middle and the bottom of greater than 13 ambulances available. And in all honesty, 13 ambulances is just a target where we feel if we have 13 trucks in Calgary, we can meet our response times. But it was 0.6% of the time that occurred on that day. So pretty low on that part of it. And then you look at response times in Calgary Metro over here, just almost 18 minutes. So that day is not a day that we'd like to have. When we look at Thursday last week, we're having more days like this in the last 3 weeks, not everyone, but 34 hours of greater than 90 minutes. We're doing work there right now. Our goal for EMS wait times, you know, when you turn on the radio and you look at the news and we're gonna get EMS out of emergency departments, our goal is that EMS shows up and in 45 minutes we're gone. We give our report to the triage nurse and they take over patient care and we leave. We don't go to the emergency room, we don't go into a hallway, and we get back in our ambulance and get out of there. Our goal is that's gonna be 45 minutes. So even on here, when I'm saying it's 34 hours over the 90 minutes, that second column over is actually the 45 minutes, so 360 hours. Our goal is that is 0 in that context. So a pretty lofty goal, but that's where we're trying to get to in that. But even right now, that day we had 60% of the time where we had greater than 13 trucks available in Calgary. And if you look at that previous Thursday, that was 0. So we are making some inroads on that. Response time in Calgary that day was at 13 minutes, sort of below that 15-minute target in that context. So that's where we're having some success. Got one more slide on sort of the hospital wait time piece. You know, if you look at this slide here, you know, the last 2 weeks, above 90, sort of a total in the zone, 365 hours. One of the first things that jumped out at me and I looked at it was this 331. Obviously it's 2 weeks that were pretty good and you're like, well, is that sustainable or where are we at? And you got to rewind 7 weeks is Christmas. And a lot of times surgeries get slowed down and those kind of pieces. And so we tend to have some less wait times there. So that's where we sort of see that trend dip down there. And that's sort of expected in that context. But what it is from 850 and 769 to 462, we are making some decent inroads. What's key for us is to keep building on that and moving to make that part of it sustainable on that part of it. So that's really the slides. The only other piece I want to touch on, and I think Carolyn joined us, but for me a little bit, and this comes from nothing related to today or meetings, when I was South and Central Zone, community engagement, and if you can picture, I always described my area as Camrose and South, except for the city of Calgary and obviously some of the surrounding areas. And to try to get to council meetings and get to every one of those, I think I mapped it out. I'd have to do 4 a week and I still wouldn't get to them all. So we're really looking at trying to find a different way to engage you guys as councils and groups in the community and that part of it. So I've worked with our community engagement, and what my plan is really sort of a spring and fall engagement, actually more where I host the meeting. Because as much as council is great, we can really get into the conversation on some of the issues that you guys are hearing, some of the planning pieces, but really dive into that. And that takes some time and some of those pieces. And in all honesty, when you look at where we're at right now, we did have the APAC committee, we had our 5-year service plan, we did Together for Health, where you guys had opportunities to put input. We've had sort of Price Watercooper review, and we've had some other event reviews. So we've had a lot of inputs. We do have, we're just waiting for our approval on sort of our 5-year EMS plan. We do have some 50 some odd initiatives that we're currently working on as those kind of get rolled out. So my goal actually in this round is just to come and recap some of those pieces, what they mean, but sort of follow, one of the things we fail to do is sort of really engage you guys sort of as partners and the community. And if you just look at our planning cycle from an AHS perspective, right, we need to be planning in October, November to make our plans for budget requests to go into January to go to sort of get our budget approval on our plan. So that's kind of my goal is to host those more in corridors. So, you know, out here where we involve sort of, you know, Banff and Siksika and Canmore and those groups, bringing representatives from the community, our medical co-responders, citizen groups, that kind of piece. So it's been a goal of mine as I was sitting there in the South and Central, and then as I transitioned into Calgary, it just makes sense that we do a bit more of that engagement and bring you guys in as partners in our planning, and also sort of making sure you guys have an understanding of the initiatives working on and what they mean and how they'll impact some of those concerns or changes, because we haven't done a good job of that part of it. So I just throw that in there before I turn it over to you guys for the hot seat and the questions.
Yeah, Mr. Passage, thank you for your presentation tonight, and we do appreciate you being here. There's likely going to be a lot of, well, look at all the lights on. There's a few questions. Most of the gallery, I think, is interested in the questions. but do appreciate you being here tonight and sharing the information with us. Councilor Reid, you're up first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tony, for being here. The mayor's right. Normally, we don't have anybody sitting in our gallery, as beautiful as it is.
I'm glad I could help fill the seats for you.
So most of these people are here to hear what you have to say. I had a couple questions, if I could. The first is, you talked about, I'm quoting you now, some weeks are good, lofty goals, some inroads. You know, and I guess people in the gallery, and I would speak now for myself, that isn't good enough anymore, you know, and we're beyond the kind of wishful thinking. And so I understand you're making some inroads, but it doesn't seem to be fast enough. One of the things that I've learned in our community is when there are community groups, they're better able to represent our community in some ways than elected officials. And so my question was, have you reached out at all to our community group here, and are you willing to be able to work with them? I know you're a busy guy, but.
No. So two things. So I do know there's a meeting, I believe, scheduled next week with the citizen group. Ann and Murray, Athana, and Ann is my boss, and I think she messaged to me that I think I'm coming along to that. So we're happy to engage those groups. It's partly, you know, as I mentioned, my community engagement piece, and honestly, it was Carolyn making sure we have all those players at the table so that they can have a voice at the table, because we haven't done a good job of two things. Sometimes we don't know that their groups are out there. And we have a lot of groups, whether it's health advisory councils, community citizen action groups. So we need to bring them to the table and help us have that voice out there and learn to fix that. So we are going to engage them on Thursday and sort of onward on what that looks like. You know, I say I made inroads. I mean, it is crystal clear. You know, we've had some leadership changes, you know, whether or not the official administrator and reporting directly to him. Through Athana. And the benefit that does potentially when I put my operational hat on is it clears out some challenges for us from an AHS perspective. Nothing against my own organization, but I write briefing notes, I wait for approvals. We're going to be streamlining some of those pieces because we recognize that we have some work to do and some immediate work to do. The official administrator has been very clear on response time targets. What he expects for March 31st improvements. You know, what I don't have is a specific response when it says Cochrane is going to get to X. I mean, our P90 right now, I think in there, I showed you was 24 minutes. We have that across the board of, like, you know, communities like Cochrane, similar size. And our goal is to, you know, in all honesty, I haven't seen what the official approved number is that is by March 31st. Are we getting to 22? And then it's literally monthly goals where he's expecting improvement and for us to report on. And so as soon as those are approved for me, I'm happy to share those of what those are and report on how we're doing in Cochrane on what those expectations are. But I can tell you both politically and from the official administrator, they're crystal clear in the importance of hospital wait times and response times being their number one priority and to fix it. So
Great. I have two more questions quickly, if I could. 120, again, just to emphasize that we've had a presentation from our local group, and they're coming with solutions, not just complaints or problems. The other two questions I had were, what more could recognizing the citizen group is we want to get out of their way and let them do the thing, but what can we do as a town council? Is there some political, like your supervisor, your minister, your ADM, that we could be lobbying to be able to get better or more support? I mean, our mayor's doing a great job in that, but it just, you know, I want to know what, like boots on the ground, how can we help you in your role?
Yeah, I always dodge this question and then answer it honestly. What it is for me, and this is in all honesty my experience, right? Especially in the rural environment that I grew up working my whole life, is council comes and they think there's concerns and we present information like this, and then they write a letter to the minister off of other concerns or things they're hearing, and the minister comes back to me and says, "Hey Tony, what about this?" And I go, "Well, you actually got a little bit of wrong information here and some wrong information there," and he corrects the information and he sends it back to council and he thinks he solved the problem. Like, no, we didn't solve the problem. I know there's a problem. And that's where I reference, you know, I can do briefing notes and I can do business planning and they don't get approved because I'm competing against the same dollar or different communities and we're having challenges everywhere. And so my goal is always to make sure you guys know exactly where I'm at, what I'm asking for, what our plans are. And if I'm not getting approvals and we're not getting action on that, then you're going to advocate on behalf of obviously your constituents and go, we know what Tony's doing, here's what the plans are. and he's not getting support from government. So that's sort of my goal, is that you guys are always advocating with the right information, and my commitment is to make sure that you guys have the right information to advocate for that part of it. So, you know, what are my answers today? What you can do? I think we just need to continue to, you know, if we can meet with the citizen group next week and understand what their solutions are and understand where those fit in our planning, and just to see where we keep going and keep seeing improvement. But I don't know if that really answers it right now, but that's just to make sure you guys have the right information so that, yeah, I'm not just, yeah, and I think for me, in reviewing where we're at and the direction of the official administrator and response times and the pieces that we're doing currently to make sure that we're not getting pulled into Calgary and that resources here. You know, the other one that I didn't mention is we are doing a request for quote for non-urgent transfer vehicles. And I think we're gonna, you know, closes in the spring coming up. Honestly, I haven't gone to the government website to look at what they're looking for. What I do understand is sort of 50 kilometers around Calgary, which will include then Cochrane. If you look at our model, we do have IFT resources here. Those IFT resources aren't going to leave here, but are they going to do emerge calls? Are going to be additional ambulances? So there is more support coming that way as we look to sort of add those resources there. So I think we've got some plans in place. We've got some budget dollars attached to those plans. And we just need a little bit of time for those things to come fruition. And I recognize in saying that, we've had 6-7 years of things that aren't there, but these are actions that are currently happening and underway, and I just need to be able to keep you guys up to date on where they're at and what that does to our response times and our community coverage.
Just one final question then, and it was a good segue into it. One of the suggestions was that we, the town, that is, purchase our own response vehicle. Would that help the situation?
I think you're referencing sort of MD Willow Creek, if I understand that correctly, potentially. So MD of Willow Creek, a little bit different but similar. They bought some vehicles 7-8 years ago. They did a few transports, not many, in that part of it. One of the things and they were just in the paper there. I was there a month ago, and I was waiting for the quotes to come out from the paper, but it took a month for it to come out. But what it is, it's not a new program that they're doing there. But what it is when, obviously from a county perspective, they're quite large, right? And when's the ambulance coming? And what it is, if they get a serious patient, what they are able to do then is go, okay, well, how long the ambulance is going to be? And one of the initiatives we've been able to do with our MFRs is give them access to our medical directors who are in dispatch now, which is there to support them in their decision making. So we've had lots of challenges like, is it life threatening? Is it really? But they're able to help support that decision and say, yeah, you know what, transport them. In whatever vehicle that might have been, or that's the best thing to do because the ambulance is 20 minutes out and you need to do that, or help support them in their treatment decision to wait for an ambulance. So happy to explore options of what that looks like for Cochrane. It does seem to work for us in the MD of Willow Creek and that part of it, but we have had through APAC, you know, and MLA Sigurdsson and Tracy Lard, who chaired that, we've done some pilots like in Spruce Grove, Sherwood Park with our folks there. And we had some success with those, and now they're trying to figure out, you know, where do those go provincially. And what it is, I don't think you can take necessarily what they're doing in Spruce Grove and go, hey, that just applies right to Cochrane. I think it's trying to understand the basis of what that's doing and say, hey, how could we do something like that in Cochrane if it works? And then that's where we need to work with our partners and our community groups on what we can do here to make some of those type of initiatives work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Nagel.
Thanks for being here this evening. It's first of all, I just want to say it's very encouraging to hear you say that you're open to talking about partnering with the municipality. I think there's certainly an interest around this table of putting resources behind that if we can figure out how to do it operationally and logistically. So I have, I guess, two questions. The first question is just in relation to kind of how bad it is, and then the second question is going to be in relation to how good the upcoming solution is. So the first question is, with regards to timing, you talked about the median response times, and you talked about the response times up to the 90th percentile, which I think was 24 minutes. I am curious about the other 10% that you're not mentioning. In the 90th to the 100th percentile, how long do some of those wait times get? Like, how often has there been wait times in excess of 30 minutes? Have they gone in excess of 60 minutes?
I can send you that. I don't have that to date, but we do have, like, I in that reporting, I get like the events of the week or in the month that would show all of those timeframes. I'm happy to send that to you.
Okay. All right. And then the second question is with regards to the policy changes that are coming forward with getting EMS members out of waiting in the emergency room. When does that all take effect actually in practice? Is it already happening, or is there a date coming?
So
where things are gonna change?
I was at a meeting today, so I don't have date that says, because it's not just one initiative, right? What the big driver that the hospitals are doing for us in the metros, and I my health colleagues have been working extremely hard at that part of it. But what they're doing is they're posting, so right now we have what we call EMS park nurses. They're staffed 12 hours a day at a few of the sites. And sometimes when they struggle with staffing, they pull that nurse and do something else with it. But what they've done in their planning that they're working on is all of the facilities will have that nurse 24/7, and the Foothills, I believe, is going to have 2. But it also is going to rank up there with their triage nurse and their charge nurse where they don't pull that nurse. So they're in the process of recruiting that. That process, let's say it takes a month to hire somebody, that part of it. They are looking to start that in mid-March, in a month. Now, whether that's through scheduling and casuals and how they're going to replace that until they get their full-time people and staffing. And not unlike us, they do struggle with staffing on that part of it, but they are committed to expand that program that we are seeing some initial good results with and formalizing that. We have our own end of it in an EMS piece of that. If you could, I haven't been on an ambulance for a while, but I know what we used to write a chart on the way, that kind of thing. And I know I was out there with our crews in Calgary, and they don't even really start writing their chart till an hour into their wait time, knowing they're going to be there for 3 hours. And so if we can get them to take over at triage, we need to be writing that chart because the last thing I need is them clearing us up in 30 minutes and we're spending another hour and a half cleaning our truck and doing our charting. So we've got a lot of stuff on our own to change our culture and clean up on and that part of it. The hospital's doing their part, and we're seeing some of those results now. They got to get that in place and get that finalized and really see what that looks like. But I don't have this is going to magically happen on a certain date, but those are the initiatives and sort of the timing, probably mid-March in there, where we're going to have that nurses in place 24/7, which will help us out tremendously.
And will those changes be enough to create a substantial improvement across the whole system? Like, will that be a 50% improvement for the operation?
There's 2 things when I look at that. And if I look at the slide here on my one good day that I'll throw out there, and this wasn't just one day, it was there was a bunch of these in the last 2 weeks. But when you look at what draws, and I think what you're asking me is not how I'm fixing Calgary, but how am I going to make sure there's a Cochrane ambulance in Cochrane, right? And so when we look at that data point, when I think of what's important there, like the 60% where we have greater than 13 trucks in Calgary, that's a good number right now, but that number should be almost 100%, right? And so that measuring and or seeing what that looks like, because in all honesty, I could go back one more day. I think is this, and I don't have it with me, but we're 60%, but Calgary's response times were still 19 minutes. So it's like, well, do we have the right station location infrastructure? But that's not going to impact Cochrane. If we're going to have units available in Calgary, fixing and improving Calgary response times when it's going to have some infrastructure issues, station location issues as communities expand. But Cochrane is really about keeping the units in Cochrane. I think where we potentially have some really good opportunity is when we do the RFQ, and if we add those IFT resources through that contract, and obviously as soon as it closes and see what we're adding, is we're going to have an opportunity to look at our all system, because we're going to gain some capacity. So we have those 2 trucks that are 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday. Is that the best use of those trucks? Do they stay in Cochrane? Do they work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day? So we'll actually be able to add resources that are for merge calls or urgent transfers, because the RFQ is for non-urgent transfers. So they'll be here for urgent transfers. Obviously, if there's none on the go, there's an ambulance in here. So the more that we can have our units, and for me, obviously growing up in the rural place, like system status management and that piece makes perfect sense when we have big, large-scale events, MVCs, that part of it. And we definitely recognize that we haven't kept up on our resources in that piece where we're needing that system status management to manage volume that we know of. When you look at the data point that says, 60% of Cochrane events or 35% of Cochrane events are being done from outside resources. What I don't have is a target that says that should be 95, 97. What I could share is like when we look at our communities, that would be our goal, is that they're self sort of reliant, and it's the MVC with 9 patients, and that's why Calgary's coming in or Airdrie's coming over, right? Those kind of pieces, and that's where we need to get that number up there. I don't have an official target I'm aiming for, but a common sense one is I'm looking for that to be above 95%, right? That's where my aim and that's what my goal is. I don't have that as an actual target by anybody, but that's my goal in operations would be that's how I want to do.
So if I could just restate my question though, because I don't feel it was fully answered. with the operational changes that are being talked about now, can residents feel comfortable that the solution will work? Or does there need to be something much more than what's being talked about? Like, do people need to keep on fighting for a bigger change, bigger policy ideas, more investment? Or is there a solution coming?
Here's what I'll answer. If you look at the last 6 years, they're not going to trust Tony answering this question. So we need to show that and prove that part of it, right? So when we look at our hospital wait times in Calgary and adding those resources, I'm confident looking at some of the days that we're having now that is going to say if we are not waiting in hospital and we add those Calgary resources, there is going to be very little opportunity or need that we're going to need to bring those resources into Calgary. So then I look at that and say, can I comfortably sit there and say, is that going to fix everything in Cochrane? Well, what I don't know, because I don't have the data on those pieces, when I look at the data in 2016 and say we were at 13 minutes, what was the volume? What was the number of resources that were on? Were they on call? Were they at home? Were they assembled? That's what I want to get back to, is that response time. And so I need to get those resources here in the community, being assembled and not in a core flex, in a 12-hour shifting pattern assembled in their ambulance. And when we're not going into Calgary, then look at what that data is and just be able to share that, present that with how we're doing. And I'm confident that it's going to dramatically improve. Does that mean it's going to get it to 15 minutes or 14 minutes? I can't answer that yet. But is it going to be well below 24? Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Flowers?
Thanks for the updates. A year ago, we did have some updates, but I haven't seen it get better. It seems to be getting harder to deal with and more complaints from the community. This is new about the 911 triage going to 811. There's concerns around making that decision so quickly. And I know when I've called 811, they ask you a million questions and then they usually tell you to go to the hospital.
Yeah. It's not a new process. That process happens in a number of jurisdictions. So it's not like we invented this from an Alberta Health Services or provincial piece. So, we didn't create it ourselves. We learned from BC, Ontario, some of those places that do that. We know, I think we anticipated based on their experience that, about 150 calls would head over to 811 and about 30% of those would come back. Obviously it's only been a month. We hear two things, right? We hear somebody calling thinking they're looking for an ambulance and they got sent to a nurse and they're not happy, like any other change of process. But we're also hearing, from some people that they're actually getting to the right place they need to go. They're getting information from a nurse. They're following up with a physician or getting some avenues that way. So, definitely some learnings that we need to learn from that part of it. It's an initiative that's going to be a small impact, I think, from an EMS piece. But right now, every little call, 150 calls or 75 of those in the Calgary zone is still 75 calls that an ambulance isn't doing that's freeing up time. So, those initiatives, we'll work to see what the impact are and then manage sort of as we learn from how they're working. But
It is scary. If I call 911, I think I need an ambulance. I hate to be talked into another number.
Yeah, but you look at our current transport rate, when you call 911, we're only transporting about 55% of those patients. So 45% aren't being transported. We've done some work to give our paramedics some more opportunities to, bring in mobile integrated health or community paramedics that can follow up with them. Sometimes it's just the need of transport and we're able to give them, as bad as this sounds, here's your taxi chit and follow up with your family doc or go get an x-ray. And so we're connected with our docs where, if based on their history that might need a chest x-ray and those pieces of family doctor. So we are trying to create more opportunities where maybe the emergency department isn't the best place. When I'm part of the Calgary task force on some of our mental health and housing pieces, right? And, transporting those patients to hospital and to emerge isn't the place that they need. So we're really trying to find the resources out there in community that are the right resource. And I think, part of that is the urgent care center in Cochrane, where we're increasing our destination as a destination there, which is we don't have the wait times there. We are able to stay in community a little bit longer. And so those initiatives, they all sort of add up and we all got to figure out sort of what resources are in what community. For example, like I was in Innisfail in November and they were just shutting down hours of their handy bus because they weren't being utilized. And I'm like, hang on, how can I use you more and work that out? And we've worked out, we're in the process of still working out how to utilize that resource more. So we've lost a bunch of those community groups that were out there that used to do some of that work. And we're starting to make some of those connections back. We need to do more of that work. But we actually rely more on some of the community that know where some of those resources are or could be helpful in our system.
The urgent care needs to be 24/7 too. We've checked into that, and it seems that they won't give more resources. Yeah, we could spread the same resources over 24 hours, but that doesn't work very well if you're short-staffed in the daytime.
No, and whatever I can do to help support urgent care 24, let me know.
If you have any ideas, let us know. The other thing I wondered about was the staffing. I know it's hard to get people, and there's a lot quitting or leaving because of stress and overwork. How are you coping with that?
Yeah, so it's, if, you know, when I look at I'll call it my priorities. As I came into Calgary sort of new, I was like, well, what am I going to do? And part of it is for me, you know, be full transparent, my management structure and making sure my director and manager, people on the street can connect with communities and make decisions. So that local decision making, you don't need to be in my office to make that. These people need to engage their staff, need to engage their communities and know their communities more than I can get out there and do that. What I need to do is listen to them and help support their work. So that's that part of it. Wait times, response times, staff engagement. So we're working on sort of our staff engagement. We do have initiative, and I look at it on paper and it says, well, support staff, and what does that mean? We have a few things on the go with that. We are changing our shifting patterns to different shift lengths, not just the traditional 12-hour day, 12-hour night, different shifting patterns, different shift lengths, different FTEs. You know, I might have a good friend who's a paramedic, and he's like, Tony, you've made, you know, full-time employment the least desirable position in the organization. We can't get vacation, we can't get time, and it's like, just make full-time desirable. I'm like, that's an easy statement, but it's a good goal for us to have. So what are we doing that's not there? Part of our staff engagement is you know, we've made some decisions on recruitment or retention or what can keep them in the workplace. But we need to hear from our staff of what works, like what does the supports they need. We do have a lot of like peer support. We got a lot of psychological health and safety things. Are they doing the right things? Do they need more? Absolutely. But we need them to be able to show up, offload their patient, and you know, when you think of the moral distress of if I, you know, go available, I'm going to get tagged on a call, but I just need 15 minutes to have a break. So we need, you know, shift breaks, we need shift lengths. Those are all initiatives that we're working on to be able to do for our staff, and the shifting patterns and those pieces. So I could list off 10 or 15 things, but it's sort of an all-in piece, and we have a ton of work that we need to do there on that part of it for staffing. So it is our number one. I'll call it, you know, I could argue I could put more ambulances on, but if I can't staff them, they're not going to come to work. I need to make sure I have the staff that are healthy throughout their career and that can come to work. And we do have some work on that. We've got a lot to do. But.
Okay, you also mentioned partnering with us. It seems it's frustrating at our level because we don't feel like we can have much of an impact. We have been advocating, other than putting a whole bunch of money in and hiring staff. Have you got other ideas of how we could partner?
Well, and hopefully my Canmore friends don't get mad at me. I'll use the example that I have in Canmore, right? So in Canmore, I have a crew that's on call 24/7. So they're not assembled, right? So that delays response time because they're going to get paged and they're going to go in the ambulance. So we're going to be working to sort of switch that crew from core flex to day night. The other part of if anybody's been in Canmore and their community, our ambulance isn't where our staff are housed or stationed. So when a call goes, they have to get in a vehicle and drive to where the ambulance is. And we've really had trouble getting locations there, like any other business, and they're kind of confined to that area. Obviously, they've moved out of their current fire hall into a new fire hall, so they have space to lease. And I'm like, hello, council, like we need to be in there. And they know that. They're working on that part of it, and we're working with them as a partner. But that's where they are able to help me, because if I can do my part and get 12-hour shifting and to help that, and they can do their part and help me get into that station and co-locate the ambulance, that's where they're able to help me do that piece to sort of improve response time. So it's just an example of how I can work as a partner. Like I can't make them give me space in that location. You know, that's where we're going to try to work there. So that's my commitment and my goal. You know, that's kind of why I reached out to Carolyn. I was out in Cochrane, and then I was out in Empty Willow Creek and sort of trying to partner with them. And I've made some commitments, and I said the last thing I said to her is like, I need to get out there and actually partner with them and engage them and have those planning things, because if I don't, I'll have no credibility or no trust, and that's my commitment, is to do that. So we have a plan in place to do that. I'd love to be able to send the invite and say, hey, we're going to do it on this day in April. My challenge this year truly is a May election, and sometimes they get a little dicey on our community engagement as we ramp up to elections. So that invite might be coming out for June, post-election, because then two things. We'll know what our government is, we'll know what our mandate is, and we can actually truly finish off that planning piece. So we might be in a little challenge before then. So I'm anticipating to do that to June, and we're just sort of working through those planning on what that day might look like to engage you guys on that part of it. So.
Okay. I think it was almost a year ago, we had a presentation with a 10-point plan. Is that still in place, or is it a whole?
Yeah, so what I'm hoping to share, so those are all the inputs that we have. So we do have a bit of a, I'll call it a list of initiatives that we're just waiting from as we change our leadership structure to our official administrator and that piece to chat a little bit more about. And those all come from our 10-point plan that we're working on. They come from our APAC committee that was out there. They come from our 5-year service planning. There's been a couple of dispatch reviews and a couple HQCA review on our data. So all of those inputs are built into what I would say is our 15-month plan, which started in January of this year and will go to March 31st of next year. So those are all the inputs into the initiatives that we're working on. What my goal really is in the planning piece is actually get into depth of what all those initiatives are, and are they solving sort of the challenges in Cochrane, because those initiatives aren't the same as in the city of Calgary and what they're going to do.
One of the things we kept hearing was that now the ambulances weren't going to be leaving the community, but here a year later, it seems like it's still a really big problem.
Yeah, we have reduced, like I said, not where we need to be. We have reduced the number of events we're doing in Calgary. So, you know, like even in the presentation, we have made some inroads on that. But like I said, it's if we can get to the 24/7 nurse in the emerge and making that sort of one more step further, then we're really going to see our resources stay in our rural communities a lot more.
Last time we were also told that it was really hard to get new ambulances. Is that still a problem, or has it gotten better?
The supply chain is still challenging for us. You know, we have to order in June of this year. So we need our POs and our government and our budget to be in line for June, and we anticipate a 2-year delivery of those ambulances we're going to order this June.
Okay. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was it was good news to know that you keep track of where the AEDs are in the community. I didn't know that. I wonder how many aren't registered, because that's good to know. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Tony, for coming and presenting. I just want to, in regards to your public engagement, I appreciate you coming out, and I can understand that it's busy and there's lots of municipalities to get in front of. And I'm always for trying to find new creative ways to engage, but I would just say that having you come and present in person is really valuable. I know the mayor kind of thanked you for bringing a crowd to our council chambers today, but I really do think the in-person presentations are really valuable, and I think it would be a loss to try to move away from those. It really gives us a chance, like our council meetings are broadcast, it allows the crowd to show up and listen to you. It allows us to record it and our press to participate in it. So I would really advocate that you find a way to keep that up. I can understand there's a lot of pressure there.
All right, I'll just comment on that quick. My goal wasn't to not do the other, but my goal was to be able to do both of those parts of it. So.
Perfect. More is better.
And the other group that I look over here, for example, in the South Zone, I think I present to the Zone 1, like the CAOs, who in that sense. So I present to the CAOs there. I did one Zone 2, which I think is sort of more of that Innisfail piece. So we are, as much as having sort of the CAOs be able to answer those questions and know some of those information. So there's lots of avenues around sort of some of that engagement piece. So. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, knowledge is always power. So just thinking back to the beginning of your presentation, like a decade ago was when the province took over the EMS, and I was on council at that time, and I think at that point we had 2 ambulances in Cochrane, and the concern was that we were going to be in this situation, and we were assured that wouldn't happen, but now we're here and we're dealing with this situation. And part of what I'm hearing from you, and lots for me to learn on the file, the metrics that we're dealing with is, not enough trucks, not enough staffing, and then there's the wait times once you get them to the hospital are kind of the 3 big barriers I'm hearing from you.
One more in there.
One more? Okay.
Our system status management plan. So for example, in corridors, because we look at our neighboring communities, And we're reviewing them provincially, because some of our system status management plans will have less ambulances than we do communities. And so even in our planning, we look at that and say, okay, well, it's okay to have 4 ambulances between these 6 communities. That's our minimum number we'll do. And so we really need to look at that planning process to understand why they were written that way, which areas there, what the risk is of that is, what does that look like in the corridor. So we're reviewing those provincially, and really trying to understand the principles by which they were built, and then create those to understand, do we need to make changes in our current system status management plans? And I would say there's definitely areas that we do, because by design, right, we might have, I'll say one that I'm more familiar with. I can go to one ambulance in Bassano or Brooks. And I've been to both those communities and that piece. And by design, I'm okay to say either an ambulance in Bassano or an ambulance in Brooks is our minimum staffing. So I'm going to disappoint one of those communities in that planning process. And we just need to understand those principles, how they affect response time, and making sure that those are the right principles that we need. So that work is ongoing right now as well.
And I think that's really important, because if I remember, like, we had 2 a decade ago, we are a population of 10,000. We're now a population of probably close to 35,000. So to be aiming to return us to 2 is like a huge failure of service level, right?
Yeah.
And this jumping from, initially it was 10, 11 minutes to get a response time. I think our fire is 12 to, 19, 20, we're happy if we could do 15. This isn't what people need. Like, at the end of the day, this is people's, lives, or how quickly they get care. If you've got a stroke, I mean, these are all things, how quickly you get that care is how quickly you recover. And so a lot of, and I've learned a lot tonight, and I appreciate the introduction, but a lot of what I'm hearing seems to be like trying to rearrange the chairs in the Titanic as it's going down. And I think, and Councillor Nagel was trying to drive to this, what do you need to make it what we need? And
So
and what's your ask? So you're saying we got 10 trucks in the fall, hopefully we'll get 10 in the spring, but is 20 in the region enough? I don't know those numbers. Do you actually need 50 or 100?
So there's probably 3 points that I need to answer this question. So the trucks we're adding are in Calgary. And what it is right now, in the last 7 years, rural communities have supported Calgary. And I need to sort of flip that script. And if I have the resources in Calgary, they need to support the surrounding area, and I need to move towards that way. So that when Cochrane is busy, I can get resources out here to support Cochrane. Because where I get challenged, and obviously I've worked rural, is where I'm making a business case because of some data trend that this community needs an ambulance, this community needs an ambulance, this community needs an ambulance. And do they all really need one, or do they just need some on certain times of the day or busyness? So I gotta flip the script and have Calgary as the larger center be able to support out more, and not ever draw on a rural community. The other piece to that is, what are we doing? Well, the RFP that got put out to put non-urgent IFT ambulances on is going to allow me to look at the model and figure out the 2 IFT resources in Calgary. And I recognize, I know there's either frontline or people associated frontline. Those positions aren't going away. We're not eliminating positions. And so those ambulances will stay in Cochrane. I have to look at then if they're not needed for non-urgent IFTs, because I have a different way to do those. That's going to build some capacity in the system for Cochrane. Right now, those are scheduled Monday to Friday from 7 to 3:30 and 4 o'clock to midnight. I need to, and it takes, 2 physical ambulance, well, 1 ambulance because they're staggered, but 4 people to do that. Is there a better staffing model? Does a demand-based scheduling, and that's where I need to look at what the resources need here. As you mentioned, you went from 10,000 to 35,000. The goal is not to go back to 2. The goal is to manage response times. And what I'll say is different right now, right, from the official administrator and government is they are clear on our goal to improve response times. If you go back, I worked in the system, obviously since 2000, whether it was up north of my front time, and that part of it is we moved away from response times for a period of time, 12 years, and we were focused on patient outcome. And I'm on the research committee. I hear what we're doing here on this treatment X and this procedure here now, how it impacts outcome. But we know, when I put my paramedic hat on, cardiac arrests, you mentioned strokes. Response times matter for those calls, and we need to get back to response time, and that's the direction of government, and that's what we need to improve on, is our response times, and we need to get those back within target.
So, and then again, I will never be able, I could spend weeks with you and never completely understand the process, and I understand that it's complex. But on the municipal side, and it's been asked, what's the best way for us to advocate? But I actually just need to know what we need to advocate for. Is it, like, what's your budget ask?
When you say mine or provincially? Provincially, I think we're asking for
Well,
60 million
I
or
want to
something.
know what you need to deliver the
For
best
Cochrane.
service for us. And then, so that we as an organization and as a community can then advocate with our MLA
Yeah,
to
and
make that
so
happen.
where I'll have a much better answer for that, right? So when my RFQ closes on, and I'm harping on a bit of that IFT piece because I'm not gonna get any action and I can't put any thought until I know that. Because when I know that, they're gonna put on 15 ambulances in Calgary and they're gonna manage these IFTs, which includes Cochrane because it's 50 kilometers. And I take away that volume of our Cochrane crews doing, I'll then be able to model and know, what are those resources in Cochrane, and are they enough to get to our response times, or do I need more? And that the challenge is I can't answer that tonight. I know you guys are looking for that part of it, but when that RFQ closes and we look at what that is, I'll be able to model knowing what resources are coming, and I can predict what resources I'm going to need. But until I know that answer on the IFT side, I can't really answer on what I need or what resources that I have here that I'm going to build some capacity, because I am going to gain some capacity. If those Cochrane resources that are here today don't need to do those non-urgent trips, that's going to build me some capacity. And I need to understand what that request is going to be and what that proposal is going to be to help me understand that capacity. And then I'll be able to answer your question that says, that's going to be enough, or I actually need more.
Yeah, anyway, I appreciate that obviously if there was a simple solution, you would have done it a long time ago and we wouldn't be having these conversations. So I appreciate it. And like I've had reports that, February 3rd, there was only one ambulance available, and February 11th, there was like no ambulances available. And so then the question to Councillor Nagels is like, what was the response time for that patient that day? And I'm just to bring that up, just to reflect again, what you're hearing is that it's failing and it's frustrating, and the community and ourselves want to be part of the solution. So if we get a clear answer on how to do that, that's the piece I need to advocate for. So thank you very much. And and we don't even provide you with a seat to have a hot seat on. It's like just a hot spot.
It's hot enough. No, but what I'll say is that the staffing side of that, and we say, your question back to support staff. And this is, I'll say my own paramedic hat, and I've chatted with enough folks. We need to get more proactive, and I hate these words, but I'm going to use it, overstaffing model, where we have more staff than we have ambulances. So when we get the short notice sick calls, because that's what really strains us anywhere. If we get 2 people calling sick tonight for Cochrane, how do I get 2 more people out here? And the staff could live here, but how do I get them to answer their phone in short notice to come to work? And is that an expectation I should have as an employer? And what we're hearing from our staff is no. Give me some dedicated time where I know I'm going to come to work, because I can predict that sick call might not be Cochrane tonight. It could be in Calgary tonight, or it could be in Airdrie tomorrow. But we can predict in our system that we are going to get 10 short notice sick calls tonight. It just happens to be where they are. I mean, we have procedures in place, and our soups do a great job to try to limit the risk and all that, but it can't eliminate it all when you get those short notice sick calls. So we need to, sort of engineer that out, support our staff better, which is going to help support our operations better. And that's what we need to solve too.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight, Tony. I have 4 questions. I'm going to try not to trot over any ground we've already been through. Question number 1, where would you recommend our residents present their grievances? Is town council the appropriate place? Is MLA level the better place to go with this? Where do we have the loudest microphone?
I would never direct members to raise their grievances anywhere. What I would say is I'm always open to chat. Is that through council to be a little bit more minuted? I'm not going to say go to an MLA, don't go to an MLA. That's for them to decide as members in your community. There are multiple avenues, and I'm more than happy to supply contact information for the ones that I know.
Okay, thank you. Every question gets better here. Here's a good one. We heard from our Citizens Action Group in the gallery last meeting. They reflected that operations were much better 10 or 20 years ago. Any comments on systematic changes made to centralized dispatch and ambulance coverage over the years? And would you agree that the 2003, I'm just picking a year, 20 years ago system has operational advantages that they were administered more locally or regionally as opposed to how we do it today?
I think I could probably argue both, in all honesty, and I'll put my rural hat on as a practitioner. So, I know of an event, right, and we can all, and there's events one way or the other, but for me, the benefit of dispatch, knowing where all the ambulances are, allows us to make sure we know what our gaps are, know what our community coverage are. And we could argue, the dispatch process isn't the issue most times, it's a resource issue. When you only have so many resources, you could be dispatched locally or provincially, but when there's no resources to dispatch, it sometimes gets viewed as a dispatch issue, and it's not. One of the big benefits, I moved from the north to Medicine Hat in 2011. We were dispatched out of Medicine Hat, Calgary, Lethbridge, 3 different dispatch centers. We couldn't see where all our trucks were. We didn't know if they were busy, not busy. We had a big MVC just outside of Bow Island, and the caller was going, "I've seen the ambulance, it drove by 2 seconds ago. It's right in front of us." But we couldn't see where it was. And so by the time, we had that ambulance respond from Medicine Hat, because that's their service area, and it took 40 minutes. Meanwhile, we could have turned around that ambulance that had driven just past that motor vehicle collision. So that's the benefit of that. A lot of the downside of the provincial scenario to that, most of the concerns I hear on that are less about the dispatch process than it is about the number of resources. We can argue, they don't know the area, all those pieces, and just like all of us use Google Maps or all those pieces, we have a lot of opportunity to put inputs into that. Medicine Hat, I hate to harp on that just because I know it. Range Road 120 is also called Black and White Trail. It's also called something else. And we're able to put all those notes into CAD so people can know where those pieces are, some of those local landmarks, all those scenarios. And then you sort of get yourself into a question, well, is Medicine Hat, or Lethbridge, and having 7 dispatch, well, is that still local? Because otherwise we would make the argument that there should be a dispatch center in every community if we're really pushing the local side of it. So, there's pros and cons. I think we need to be resourced correctly. When I, and I've shared this before previously, when you think of the transition, I remember going to council in 2010, and they're like, "What is this system status management?" He explained it, well, when there's big events. And so I was up north when the Slave Lake fire happened, and we had 12 ambulances there within 30 minutes. Because they could just send it. We didn't have to have mutual aid agreements, all those other things that historically we'd have to have. And so that made perfect sense. I think we call it in Calgary some time ago, Fallmageddon. There was freezing rain. We had falls and hip fractures everywhere. We're able to just send the resources that we need for those events. And that's where system status management makes perfect sense. The dispatch be able to see that. But, 5 years later, I'll call it 2015, we didn't keep up with the number of resources we needed. And from there, all of a sudden it became, we're using it for more everyday volume, not the big events, not the Slave Lake flyers, not the big falls. And it's becoming the way I do business. You take it to 2020 when we had the 30% increase and we still really didn't keep up on resources. And you could argue the 30% increase, we probably would never have planned for that kind of increase in that context. Now we had a year of sort of leveling, in that first year of the pandemic, and then it sort of hit us in year 2. But if we have kept up on it there, we could have reacted a bit better and wouldn't have had such drastic sort of changes in some of our coverage and response. We're doing a lot of work on adding some rural resources with Core Flex and moving away to 12-hour shifts. We're adding the stuff in Calgary. Right now, I take this with a grain of salt. I say we're sort of getting back to 2005. We're still probably not at the right number of resources we need. But we are now focused on response times. And so that allows me in operations to have a much better target that says we're focused on response times. What are your plans to fix there, and what's the accountability of that? If you look at our history in that piece, we were focused more on patient outcomes and trying to do, this treatment X is going to equal a length of stay, and trying to navigate our data when we still know cardiac arrest and stroke response times matter. And so that's the simplistic version of where we're at today is we're back to response times. We're back to response times matter, and we're going to be focused on those plans to get there.
Thank you. When I wrote my third question here, I thought it would be based around dispatch, but based on what you just said, maybe it's an operational question. You'd express frustration within the system when answering Councillor Reid here. Should we be lobbying for systemic change overall instead of just increased funding? something like decentralized models I put here have worked better in the past. You just said that's not necessarily the case based on dispatching. Is it a systematic problem that we should be arguing for? Or is it just straight funding? We're just not funding it properly?
The focus, right, it's, you know, that's the piece. You know, I think somebody asked me once and on, you know, our change in leadership to the official administrator. And we don't know the answer, like what that, you know, they're new into their roles, but the benefit for us is we've got the direct ear, when I think of the official administrator, the board. And so our funding requests and the things that we need, we have direct line of sight to there. Versus sort of our going through our community, because what would happen is we do our briefing notes and we're going up against the ER department and their staffing and surgical, you know what I mean? We're competing in a large organization for dollars. You know, and that's the part that is challenging for us when it comes to budget. And what's key for me is making sure, as you guys have asked numerous times, is you know, if I can give you guys what our plans are, what our gaps are, and what you can advocate for me, and it's pretty clear that it's response times. And so I got to get that, you know, back down to, you know, right now the targets are 10 and 15 minutes for a community greater than 3,000, and we're need to get below that. So we got a lot of, I mean, we could argue that says that should be 12 minutes or 13 minutes, but I'll more lovely engage that conversation when I'm below 15, and then we can chat about where we can get to on that part of it. But I think we got a lot of work in front of us to get below 15. But what's beneficial for me is I need to have plans in place to help us get us there. You know, part of me, I've you know what I've said my plan is, and if we haven't, we're going to have an opportunity here in the next 6 weeks around that RFQ and the IFT, and sort of look at the resources that are here in Cochrane, do the modeling and predict where our response time. We've got some further work on hospital waits to make the resources that are here. I need those plans to be in place so that I know what I have, and then happy to come back and chat with an update on that part of it. But that's where I might get into a point that says, here's where you're at, here's the dollars I have no other sort of business cases waiting for approval, and this is the response time that we're at. And that's where I'll be able to answer sort of is it just dollars, or is it the model? You know, the thing is in Cochrane, unlike some of the rules, we do have 12-hour shifts. We don't have 24-hour shifts. We're on call at home. Some of those things impacted response time, so we're doing better there. Going back to one of the other statements before, urgent care, the more opportunity we have urgent care 24 hours a day, we see the benefits of that from an EMS and a destination perspective. Is that enough of a business case to make it go 24 hours? Probably not, but it's a piece of it. All of those are pieces of what we need to communicate and the benefit it is for us.
Thank you. My last question, this is the best one, I think. If Cochrane estimates itself underserved by current operations, are we encouraged to add resources ourselves? So the Citizen Action Group recommended a $150,000 to $180,000 emergency response vehicle, possibly operated by our trained fire staff members at our last committee of the whole. Does this idea have merit in your opinion? And then on top of that, I just heard in our presentation, alternatively, did you mention there's 2 local vehicles that aren't currently utilized 24 hours? Is there an opportunity to expand those hours possibly with our operations staff? Do either of those ideas have merit in your estimation? So
we've done a couple things in Vulcan, for example, of how we've engaged their firefighters to help support our work. And so we've had some decent success there. And that's a staffing piece because they're local. They have a way to now sort of, I'll call it be employees of AHS and go on the ambulance and drive for us. So there's opportunities that we're able to do there that might be something. I don't want to say we're doing this in Vulcan, we do the exact same thing in Cochrane, but there's pieces where we're doing some of that work. MD of Willow Creek, the fire response model in Spruce Grove. So we just need to sit down with your fire folks to understand, and you guys as a municipality, of what you're able to allow them to do, or what that would look like for them to participate. You know, we also hear from rural groups. Like, my goal personally from an operations perspective is I'm not designing my plan to get to response times below 15 minutes and have to rely on the fire department to do that, right? I want to have a plan in place that is EMS response times. Now, can they augment the system and help us get us there? Can they help get us there and some immediate interim pieces? Is there some stuff that we can do action on a short-term basis? Absolutely willing to sit down and figure out what that could look like.
Oh, okay, great. I was just about to ask the follow-up that, is this an interim piece? Is this a Band-Aid solution for a year, or is this a long-term thing that Cochrane would be participating in? But you're saying you have to analyze the situation to know that. And
yeah, I've seen us do both, right?
Okay.
Where, you know, MD of Willow Creek, that started 7 years ago, and now we sort of have it operationalized. in that part of it. So, you know, at one point, they were buying ambulances to do calls, and then we worked with them to navigate where we are today. And I think the benefit is learning from that, so we don't have to, you know, follow through some of the challenges that we had, and how do we build on that to make a solution that's helpful in Cochrane.
I didn't hear you answer the two part-time vehicles that are currently in Cochrane. Is there opportunity there to have them work longer
Yeah,
shifts with
there
additional
is.
resources?
You know, I'll say the government has announced sort of 40, so two things. The 20 positions that are there are overstaffing. We have that. We need to hear from government for 40 positions for Calgary zone, but the intent there is to solve the root cause of Calgary. And then that's where I could probably use, you know, help from your end of it is when we think of if I can meet response times with solving some of those, and here's where response times get to. If I can't, because vehicles, as I mentioned, if we order in June, are going to take 2 years, we're looking at how do we piggyback on hours, how do we utilize that crew 24/7. The challenge there, and what I don't have in front of me in the data, and what I want to share is, I don't know if a third truck at night is where our issue is in Cochrane, right? Versus is it 4 during the day that we need, versus having 3 at night. And that's where we just need to sort of look at our planning and our system planning to understand what the demand-based schedule needs to look like. So.
Okay. Thanks for all the time in the microphone. I appreciate you being here.
Looks like we're winding down on questions. I don't have any further questions myself. My colleagues did a good job in grilling you on all of the points. Two that stood out for me, and I don't need a response. I just, one is the city needs to support Cochrane. That's the first time I've heard that in any of these EMS presentations, and that really resonates with me. I feel like the opposite has been happening, that Cochrane's been helping, or Airdrie or Okotoks, the satellites have been helping the city, and I really appreciate that. The second was when you mentioned, and I appreciate you raising this, the lack of trust in AHS and EMS. I think that's a bigger issue than maybe, I don't want to say that what AHS has perceived it to be, but it's the bottom line, and you've heard it from all my colleagues tonight, and I think you'd hear it from everyone in the community. Really, we're just scared. If we're going to call 911 and there's the risk of not having an ambulance come in a reasonable response time, that's really what we're up to. And that the lack of trust in that system is going to take a long time to rebuild. And I appreciate you saying that, and that anything you tell us tonight, we're likely taking with a grain of salt, going, okay, prove it.
If I was in your seat, I'd have the same thoughts.
Well, and it's good that the numbers are trending in the right direction, and that does take time, I understand that, but that lack of trust and rebuilding that is gonna take an effort. So thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you standing at the podium and taking all of our questions. But as you can tell, and as I know you know, this is important to not just Cochrane, but Albertans.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will get you some data, so on the events and all of
The
that piece.
10%.
So I think I had the one action to take away at this point, but,
Okay,
all right.
Thank you. Council, bio break, keep moving. Keep going? Okay, thank you. We have some first readings. It's not exactly a whole lot of information we need to, well, we're gonna see a mass exodus too, but let's go. Okay, bylaws. Bylaw, Greystone Phase 6, Mr. Corman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here to have first reading of bylaw 05-2023 being proposed as a land use amendment within the community of Greystone. Administration is recommending the council give first reading to the bylaw 05-2023 and establish a public hearing date for Monday, February 27th, 2023 at 5:30. I'm just going to quickly go through because in the committee of the whole last week, Ms. Anna Cacario gave you quite a elaborate look at this this proposal. But this is the area in which outlined in red for the neighborhood plan that is looking for the land use change. And it is approximately 4.42 acres that is moving from special industrial to a low residential low density, 4.28 acres of special industrial to a residential mixed-use district, and a tiny sliver of 1.18 acres to Parks and Recreation. So as I said, I'm looking for first reading and the establishment of a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Corman. Deputy Mayor Nagel, motion?
I was looking for the exact motion on the screen, is not there. I will move the recommended action that we have.
First reading.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. And public hearing for February 27th.
Two motions now?
Nope, one more.
Okay, all in one motion, there you go.
Okay, everybody's clear? First reading, public hearing, February 27th, 5:30. All those in favor? Carries, thank you.
Thank you.
We've got 5B.
Mayor Janung?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Because the delegation was present at a regular council meeting this evening, there does need to be a motion to
Oh,
accept that presentation for
Yes,
information.
that's right, thank you. Procedural goalpost, or no? Lane, we're out of, I need a motion for information on the presentation from EMS.
I will move to accept the presentation from EMS as information.
And now we better vote for it. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Always appreciate the legislative process that we need to follow. Mr. Hubble, you were with us tonight for 5B, sanitary sewer bylaw amendment, also a first reading?
That is correct, Mayor Janung.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll stall a little longer if you want to get your presentation up. Looks
If
like
you
the
don't
screen
mind.
died on us.
Oh, no.
This is the same presentation we saw in Committee of the Whole. I'm doing my darndest. Here we go.
Okay.
Could tell a dad joke. Saved by the bell.
Good evening, Mayor Janung, members of council. Thank you for providing the opportunity to discuss amendments to the water and sanitary sewer bylaws in support of the 2023 utility budgets. Here's an overview of what we'll be covering tonight. Principles in alignment with the strategic plan, and amendments to bylaw 1023 for the sanitary sewer, and amendments to bylaw 1123 for the water utility. As a reminder, the 2023 water and sanitary sewer utility programs were built with Council's strategic plan in mind, specifically drawing upon the foundational pillars of financial and environmental stewardship and the increased resiliency of both our organization and our built environment. Let's begin with the sanitary sewer bylaw amendment. Building on the positive momentum following the water and sanitary sewer rate committee of the whole presentation last week, Council is being asked to give first reading to the 2023 Sanitary Sewer Bylaw Amendment 2023. As I discussed at last week's Committee of the Whole meeting, for 2023, I'm proposing an average residential rate increase of $4.24 due to non-discretionary contracted sewage treatment and inflationary increases. You might note that these charts look a little different tonight compared to last week, as I incorporated the observation from one of our councillors that it would be good to see the non-discretionary impacts and the proposed work plans delineated separately.
That's what I said.
The top chart identifies the non-discretionary items impacting the 2023 sewer utility budget, while the bottom chart outlines the proposed 2023 work plans and demonstrates how the costs associated with these valuable maintenance tasks are being offset by the savings gleaned from the chemical analysis project completed in 2022, resulting in zero impact to the 2023 sanitary sewer utility rates from these work plans. This chart demonstrates how we stack up against other municipalities when we apply the $4.24. Of note, even with the proposed increase, Cochrane remains the lowest of all regional comparators which have their effluent treated by the City of Calgary, including the City of Calgary. Now, considering all that I've shared last week and during tonight's presentation, I respectfully request Council to consider my first recommendation and provide Council first reading to Bylaw 10-2023.
Thank you for your presentation and reminder of your excellent presentation at Committee of the Whole last week. Councillor Reid, you have a motion?
I'll make the motion, the first reading of bylaw 11/2023, water utility. And if I could comment, I wanted to express.
sorry.
Sorry?
Didn't mean to take your,
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's the mayor's prerogative. Just to express my appreciation for the excellent presentation you did last week. And because of inflationary increases and the current infrastructure repair and replacement program, and sadly, this becomes a necessary evil. But I think the exciting thing that you didn't mention in this report was the opportunity of the results of the water mitigation program, which I think is a wonderful opportunity. And again, kudos to you and your team in terms of being able to get that forward. I did have one question though. Will the water connection fee be eventually part of this bylaw, or is that a separate bylaw unto its own?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, yes, it will be part of this bylaw, but it'll be presented by Ms. Dela Cruz, as she's the one that's leading that initiative.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Councillor Reid. See any other, well, I do. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. That just generated a question for me. I was going to ask when we're going to be seeing likely second and third readings. It looks like it's bylaw to go into effect April 1st, so we can expect that in March. Is that correct for second and third readings?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, I have us scheduled for second and third reading, assuming I receive first reading tonight, on the 27th of February.
Okay, excellent. And that's when we'll be hearing from Ms. Dela Cruz about water connection fees as well.
That's a separate item altogether.
Oh, it is?
We'll have a separate.
I understand that. Yeah,
And that's on February 21st, so it's next week.
wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor of first reading? And that carries. Thank you, Mr. Hubble. And I believe you're going to stick around for the water utility one as well. Look at that.
The second piece of business tonight is to discuss amendments to bylaw 11/2023 in support of the 2023 water utility budget. Once again, building on the positive momentum following the Water and Sanitary Sewer Rate Committee of the Whole presentation last week, Council is being asked to give first reading to the 2023 Water Utility Bylaw Amendment 11/2023. As discussed at last week's Committee of the Whole meeting, for 2023, I am proposing an increase of $2.53 to the average monthly residential account. This increase addresses inflationary impacts to the department, but more excitingly, provides the much-needed resources to begin capitalizing on the water loss opportunities across our community. Of course, water loss has a measurable and significant return on investment from a dollar and cents perspective, but also allows operations to do our part to maximize our current water licensing while Ms. Dela Cruz and her team actively pursue opportunities to acquire additional licenses. This chart demonstrates how we stack up against other municipalities when we apply this $2.53. As you can see, our water utility rates remain significantly lower than that of our regional comparators. Before we move on to the recommended options, I'd like to take a moment and update Council on a couple of the asks that came out of last week's Committee of the Whole meeting. At the request of Council, we're actively working with communications on a community-wide education message that identifies our current water conservation and rebate opportunities. Our plan is to have this information provided to the community well in advance of the effective date of any rate changes. Additionally, we'll conduct a scan of other municipalities to determine what other conservation opportunities exist, and anything of note that we identify will be brought forward to Council for future consideration. Next, Councillor Wilson posed a hypothetical question about what the impact of moving away from our water billing tiers, and additionally request a little more information on what other municipalities are doing in this regard. Let's begin with the latter. We've surveyed our regional peers, and it appears as though roughly half are utilizing a flat rate, and the other half are utilizing a tiered rate. Now, regarding the hypothetical tier flattening question, we crunched the numbers. If we were to blend our current tiered rates into one flat rate to offset the higher water users' usage, the result for 74% of residents who solely fall into Tier 1 would be an increase of 13 cents per cubic meter, or an increase of $1.76 to their monthly water bills. Essentially, 74% of residential accounts would increase by $1.76 to cover the 26% of high water usage users in the community. So through the chair to Councillor Wilson, thank you very much for your question, sir. It was a valuable tier validation exercise we went through the last few days. So back to script. Once again, considering all that I've shared this week, or last week, and during tonight's presentation, I respectfully request Council consider my first recommendation and provide first reading to Bylaw 11-2023.
Councillor Wilson, out of the gate.
Am I allowed to ask a question about that last piece, or are we here only to move first reading?
We can put a motion on the floor and be happy
Wonderful.
to-
I'd love to put the motion on the floor for first reading for bylaw 11-2023.
You have a question?
I did. So if the result of going from tier to flat rate would be a $1.26 increase for 74%, I'm just doing quick math for the 26%, it would be a decrease of something more than that, $3 perhaps? Do we have that number?
I don't have that number handy. Apologies, Councillor Wilson.
Any chance we could have that number for our second reading?
Absolutely.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. Motion on the floor for first reading. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you for your presentations tonight.
Thank you for your support, Council.
All right, moving through our agenda. That's bylaws, business, none, finance, none tonight, notices of motion, none, mayor's report, one. Yeah, lots happened in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to go in chronological order. Please bear with me. I'll try and pack it into 2 minutes, he said with a smile. We had a delegation from Cochrane go to Edmonton to confirm Rachel Notley for our Mid-Size City Convention here in March. And I also took the opportunity to meet with Alberta Muni's president, Mayor Kathy Heron, and the CEO, Dan Rude. Had conversations about how Alberta municipalities could better support communities our size and what work the mid-sized cities was up to. Rushed home that night, met with our CMP Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zablocki and the number 2 for Alberta, Mr. Trevor Dureau. Took the opportunity there to plug our extra admin space at the detachment. Thank you, Ms. Lowe, for all the work you're doing there. They were aware of it, and they're going to get back to you, not me. I took the opportunity to have lunch with the Mount St. Francis Retreat, the brothers and the whole staff there. It was an excellent, informative lunch. I have asked them to have and invite all of council and administration for a tour of the facility and additional luncheon so that we can better understand the function there. Regular meeting of the SLS Center, new name. Board meeting, I can't remember which week it is, but I will forward you the CEO report, which outlines the membership rates, the financials, and all of the stats that have been accrued over the past, I think, quarter. Mostly trending upward. The costs budgeted last year were less than the expenses, so that's a good thing. IMC with Rocky View County, I have colleagues that will speak to that, but in my view, best meeting we've had in a while with our colleagues. CMRB, update there. MNP has been hired as the consultant to produce a regional economic development report, and there's a whole project. There's 2 working groups being formed, or sorry, a working group being formed and 2 workshops coming soon. There's room for 2 elected officials at that table there. I would be looking for a second if there's anyone on council that has some time for that. I can send you the dates. The Trail Steering Committee continues to meet. There's an Owners Council that you're likely aware of. They're honing in on a bridge location, working on operating agreements, and the fundraising continues. Mid-Size Cities continues to work on a summit that I've talked about before. There's been a couple meetings about that. I had a meeting, or sorry, an interview with the Calgary Herald. I think it was supposed to come out on Saturday in regards to South Bow Landing and what that means for Cochrane. And then that takes us to the Garmin announcement last week, which you're all well aware. That announcement had excellent media coverage, very well done by our communications department to really whip up the excitement around the province and the nation, actually. I did an interview with 630 Ched on the talk show in Edmonton about it. And sorry, we're going to have to miss it. You'll have to catch the 11 o'clock version. We made Alberta primetime. Told there's 6 or 7 minute report on Cochrane, Garmin, and all of the functions that exist with that. Airing tonight at 6 and again at 11, so we missed the early show. Just saying that there was a lot of attention on Cochrane for that, and that was awesome. Good to have a positive news story. I also invited Minister Schultz for lunch that day, invited Mayor Kissel from Rocky View County and Mayor Brown from Airdrie to jointly advocate to the minister that it's not just urbans that are having an issue with the LGFF formula and needing more support in sustainable long-term funding, but also our rural neighbors. So the three of us together presented to the minister, and that was positive. I received a letter back today saying that they're making changes. And last but not least, the State of Cochrane event. And I just want to go in maybe to a little bit of detail about how that event unfolded. And I've written out most of it, and I don't know if I need to follow the script so closely, but I was really looking forward to that event. The lead up to it on social media and all of the hubbub around protesting and people upset about certain things certainly created a level of anxiety for myself, I'm sure others as well. And as I approached the ranch house that evening, I was curious in what the group was trying to share with us, or what, and I actually stopped for a moment and I thought, well, isn't this cool? We live in a community in a country that is just provides us the space to be able to openly share our opinions with elected officials in a peaceful protest. As I walked up, that curiosity kind of changed pretty quickly as the group, and I wasn't clear what they were protesting, what the message that they were asking from us or trying to tell us. It wasn't clear. That curiosity, as I said, quickly changed to, this isn't quite a friendly protest or peaceful in any means, and turned to a hostile environment. And I've given a lot of thought over the weekend whether I even want to share these words, because I didn't want to take and put more attention on these people or on the behaviors, but I can't sit back and let that happen in our community. So I think it's important that all of Cochrane residents understand fully what transpired that evening, as I don't think it's been accurately represented in the media coverage that I've seen to date. And as in every group, it was only a few individuals, but I am disgusted and disappointed in the behavior of some of these protesters. It's one thing to peacefully demonstrate and share opinions, as I've said. It's another to take it out on families. I was anticipating a group that night, and I was unsure of the intentions of that group, so I asked my family to walk in separately. I stayed in my car and waited for my family to get into the building so that they could get through without having to maybe partake in some of the outbursts or attention that might be directed at me personally as an elected official. So this is the troubling part for me. I hope I can get through this. The insults and outright nastiness to my family that night was cowardly and unnecessary. Spitting in my wife's face and threatening my children is a new low, and I am saddened that this is happening in our community. Somebody uttered, "That's his family," and that's when it turned. Take up your issues with me. Take up your issues with the mayor and council. Share your disappointment, your concerns, your desire for something to be different, but that was unacceptable. And I have to say, in my 40 plus years of living in Cochrane, that was the first time I've felt unsafe here. And it's sad. I have come to work today reinvigorated and full of purpose. Through adversity, you'll learn a lot about the people around you. I am so proud of my family, and I am thankful to them for their continued support. Facing that group and holding their heads high for me in the face of intimidation and spit and bullying was above and beyond. To the town staff that literally put themselves between council and protesters, thank you. To those staff who walked in with and cared for my parents, wife and children, thank you. To all the staff that experienced that event for what it truly was, thank you for carrying on with your duties that evening and helping to deliver what ended up being an awesome event. Lastly, I will say Thursday night has reaffirmed for me that we are on the right track with our work for our community building, because there is no room in our community for those behaviors. So I'll end it there. And I'll say that that was an awesome event. And I thank you for those that were there. It has been videotaped. It has been uploaded. Those that couldn't afford to be there or didn't want to be there for any reason, political reasons or otherwise, can certainly watch the speech. I really took away from that evening that it was, again, we're on the right track. We're doing good work. And there's a way for people to share their disappointment or discourage us from the path that we're on. But overall, I was overwhelmed with the support for the work that we're doing. And I will end my 2-minute report on that. Thank you for indulging me in that. Councillor Flowers, you have a council report?
Yes, I had a prepared statement as well. Sorry if it's repetitive for some of the things that you mentioned, but I wanted to get this off my chest. I'm sorry that you went through all that. I had no idea that it was that rough. I really wanted to give a shout out to the Chamber of Commerce for the State of Cochrane event that they provided last week. It was well organized and focused on the business community. It was a full room here at the Ranch House. But then I heard many complaints in the community about the $50 charge, which I believe was not well understood. It was geared to the business people. Anyone who has put on an event knows that there are many expenses involved with those things. The food, the staff time, facility costs, and the equipment rentals. I don't think it was a big moneymaker for the chamber. There was lots of great networking between the participants. We had wonderful hors d'oeuvres. Great job by Gourmet to Go. Mayor Janung made an amazing overview of all the work that we are doing here in Cochrane. The advocacy work with the province, as well as our plans for the future. It was well received. He got a standing ovation when he was finished. I was very proud of that. The speech was recorded, and like you say, it's going to be shared. For anyone who was not able to attend, there's many other ways to get information about the work that's happening in Cochrane and to give feedback. For example, Seniors on the Bow hosts the mayor quite regularly. He shares what's happening and answers all the questions, and it's free. All of our council meetings for the last 5 years have been recorded and are on the Cochrane website. So any topic that people want to go back and review, it's all there. The mayor has made many videos on the infrastructure projects, and you can view them online as well. And we're planning to host more pop-up booths in the community in the upcoming months. We kind of quit that during COVID, but we're going to get back at it. And we're really looking forward to the Chamber of Commerce trade show in May. Those are just a few of the communication tools that we have. And of course, email any of us at any time. The most disappointing part of that event was the protesters outside the Ranch House. Yes, we all have a right to gather and protest as long as laws are not broken. It is an act of expressing our disappointment in what's going on. But this was not a peaceful process, as it did cause harm. I know that 2 of the council members were grabbed by the main organizer at the event. Insults and obscenities were screamed, intimidation was used, and they had children in the group with them. Such a bad example. And I think perhaps assault charges should be considered, because there is video of this accosting of the people, and there's evidence available that it happened. It also seemed like most of the protesters weren't even from Cochrane. I've been here 35 years and I'd hardly recognized anyone. I was trying too to sort out what the message was that they were trying to share with us, and it certainly was not clear. I went away thinking it really had nothing to do with us. It's more of a statement about global issues that are completely out of our control. So that's all I have to say about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm on the board of the Rocky View Foundation, and we were anxious to get our strategic plan finished and out to you, so I gave each one of you a copy and left a few for management. It's a good short read, and if anyone in the public would like a copy, they can ask me for one. I've got more copies, or it's also online with the Rocky View Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I wanted to just add a comment to the State of the Union address. Clearly, it was a chamber event that the mayor, as spokesman for council, was invited to. And in proper preparation, each member of council was made aware of that and had a video presentation as part of that. So in full disclosure, we understood what the event was about. I was glad to be able to be there to be a support to the mayor. I too was one of those people who had an unfortunate experience with the organizer, who did physically put her arms on me and tried to block my entrance to the meeting, then shouted out, "He's one of those counselors," and then a barrage of vulgarities were hurled at me and those around me. And so, yeah, it was a really unpleasant experience. But you know, the one thing that the mayor had said in the meeting, and I took note of, was it's time for the silent majority to stand up and lean in. And while I don't think that he actually had prepared his remarks in anticipation of what was going to happen outside, it is a call. It is a salient call for all of us to be able to, while respecting the rights of others in terms of their freedom of expression, but to do so in a civilized way. And I think in many ways, I was glad to be a council member there, to be of support to the community and the business community that we were hosting that night, or we were being hosted by that night, but also as a member of council. And Jeffy, I think you did a fabulous job, and I hope others get the opportunity to see the video. I just want to report on the intermunicipal committee that the mayor, Councillor Flowers, and I all sit on with our colleagues at Rocky View County. We met with Rocky View County, talked about the town ownership agreement over the Spray Lake Center, which has been, I don't know how to describe it, but anyways, nothing's happening fast with that, I guess is what I would say, for a whole host of reasons, which seem to be beyond our control. Rocky View County gave us an update that they, about the agreement they have, the amalgamation agreement, annex agreement with the city of Calgary, which is an excellent example of collaboration and a nod to those who think that regional planning is not appropriate, that CMRB is of no value. It clearly is of value, and this is a hallmark example of why we need that in our region. The Rocky View County reported that they are going through a strategic planning process. It's a foresight document, and one of the interesting attributes of that is that it'll have measurable KPIs and levels of service for all departments. And as the mayor of Rocky View County indicated, it's a reset for them as a council. Cochrane provided us several updates. I won't go through that, most of which we know. There was discussion about this, the SMI, or what was SMI funding, and the county and the town are locking arms and being able to go forth as a united front in advocacy against to the government on that. Likewise, we hope that we might be able to have some discussions about, and I don't want this to be taken out of context, but the potential opportunity of our next transportation project, and that is the twinning of Highway 22, a new bridge all the way south to Trans-Canada. Rocky View County will, while there's no agreement in place yet, Rocky View County will consider that in terms of being able to move forward with their council. And then finally, there was a discussion or indication, a report on the Rocky View Foundation, which Councillor Flowers sits on, and the RFP process, which is being prepared, which is a major step forward for that project and the members, seniors of our community who will eventually use those facilities. So that would be my report.
Thank you, Councillor Reed. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I don't have a lengthy report by any means, but just a comment on the State of the Union event. I was the fourth member of us that attended that night. I was a little later showing up, so perhaps some of the crowds had dissipated by the time I got there, but I spent 10 minutes out there talking to what was left anyway, and I definitely, amongst the crowd, it sounds like some bad actors, and I'm truly sorry for what happened to anyone else who was in there before me. I had a little bit different experience where there were some legitimate grievances out there that I was talking to people about, and I appreciate the people that showed up and actually, equated themselves properly to protest rather than some of the stories I heard about those came before me, because that's truly concerning. So sorry to hear that, but I guess maybe it's just not a blanket statement about everybody that was outside the building that day, because clearly some of the people I talked to, I don't know, I thought were presenting themselves appropriately. And finally, well, as a compliment to the mayor, I thought you did a tremendous job representing Cochrane during the State of the Union. I'm always impressed when I see how we present ourselves intermunicipally and provincially, and thank you for your talk. You clearly spent a lot of time getting that together, and I just had one question about where the public could view the State of the Union message upcoming. Is it a Facebook message that's going to be posted shortly, or where would we find that? Or maybe administration would know that better.
I think it's on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. Yeah.
Excellent. I'd encourage anybody to go watch it. I thought it was, there's a lot of optimism happening in this community, and it was a pretty impressive speech. So hopefully it's available soon to everybody that didn't attend the dinner in person.
I think it's already been uploaded.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen it yet. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just this afternoon.
That's all
Okay.
I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Donan. I did want to speak briefly to the State of the Union event. I wasn't able to make it at a previous meeting booked, but when hearing about the protest was happening, and I didn't understand what the focus and the point of it was, I did come up just prior to the event starting and talked and engaged with some members of the crowd, and it was fairly intense, and parts of it were unfortunate. My engagements with members was fine, but there was a lot of negative energy there, and I certainly appreciate staff that I felt were there and representing and looking after everybody and themselves, and I certainly felt that you had my back as I headed back outside to, deliberately engage and try to understand kind of the concerns. It seemed nothing centralized, nothing really focused. A lot of the concerns were global, but the disappointment and the sadness for me is that what was an evening, an honest attempt, an authentic attempt to engage with our community in a thoughtful way, was tainted slightly by the behavior of just not the right place to kind of engage in that behavior, and I'm really sorry for anybody that this is a tough enough job as it is to go through bylaws and policies and the day-to-day engagement, but to have to go into an experience when your safety is threatened, or worse, your family is threatened, is a terrible thing to have to go through. And I'm sorry for anybody that had to experience that. Jeff, your family handled themselves with grace and bravery, and I heard great things about the event itself. And certainly when I drove up and saw the crowd, I had my daughter with me, and I made the deliberate choice to leave her in the truck, because really was a little bit uncertain about what this experience was going to look like. So it's I think it's just unfortunate that what was really, and it sounds like it really did succeed in informing as an attempt to engage, got hijacked slightly. And I certainly support the intent and the right of everyone to protest and to engage. And I just encourage everybody that, and we've talked a lot, this group, about the need for civic literacy. And as the mayor said, to lean in, and that in our system of democracy, we're supposed to disagree, but it needs to be done respectfully. We need to understand also the concept of loser consent. Sometimes you don't, get your way in a vote, or in an election. And we have to accept that that's the way our model of democracy works. So, anyhow, thank you to everybody who participated. And Jeff, I heard great things, and thank you for the grace and bravery you're exhibiting in this, because this is not an easy job to do, and some years it just gets tougher. So thank you for that. So none of that was prepared. I hadn't realized that the personal interactions of some of the members was as intense and as physical, which is just not forgivable. So with a pause, though, I do have some brighter notes, if that's all right. Parks and Recreation Committee met last month, and just those meetings are the fourth Tuesday, and so they're kind of out of sync with our council meetings, and I sometimes forget to give an update. So it was the first meeting with the new recruits. What we did is we sat down, got an update from Mitch, and also kind of did a review for anybody who participated in the pathway gap analysis, and we had the targeted stakeholder engagement session, which was was a lot of fun, and those who participated really enjoyed it. So we kind of got that feedback. The group went through and kind of looked at that information, kind of compiled it, pulled our thoughts together, and that data is then going to feed into the next steps of our recreation master plan. So that group continues its work, and we'll be continuing to give you updates with that group. And then on another note of different types of engagement, I guess, I've been working with Mayor Thorne and a handful of other elected officials from around the region. I've been fortunate in my years on council to have kind of a network of other women elected officials to be supportive and to occasionally meet for a beverage and kind of chat things out and have those calls like, hey, what are you guys doing with your budget? Or we've got this going on, or how do you deal with that? And so I've been fortunate to have a network of women to be a resource. And we was like, we really need to maybe make this bigger. And so Mayor Thorne's kind of led the charge, and a couple of our other elected officials have led the charge and sent out an invite to the women elected officials in the region to see if they would like to get together to kind of formalize something and have a networking event, an education event, and a bit of peer learning, peer development, those type of things. So when we first sent out the invite, my expectation was there might be a dozen women that wanted to gather and have a chat. But my understanding is we've got 50 of the 70 women have registered that they want to participate in our first meeting, first week of March. So now that since that's bigger than the initial corner of a pub I was envisioning, I've reached out to administration to see if perhaps they could help us host the first of this network of women elected officials. So that's a fun step happening in my world, but that I wanted to share with the group. So I think, Susan, you got the invite? And
I signed up.
you signed up? Good, excellent. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been working on lately. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. There's always lots going on, and onward we push. With that, we do have a couple of in-camera items. We need a motion to go in camera, and then we'll take a bit of a recess and allow the bead to go away. Need a motion? Councillor McFadden, all those in favor of going in camera? Carries, thank you.